Welcome to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jen Trepic, talking wellness and weight loss for real life. We're here to clear up the myths, misinformation, bad science, and marketing to teach you how to eat and how to cheat. Are you ready? I'm having salad with a side of fries. This week, we're talking about the Minnesota Starvation experiment. So this was a study conducted, it started in 1944, went to 1945. And I hear you, you're like, this study is really old. I know. With that said, a lot of people still don't know about it. And we'll get to this, but it will likely never be repeated. So the premise was that they were investigating the psychology of starvation, or really semi-starvation. I'll explain that in a second. And then the process of refeeding. To me, though, the piece of this that's fascinating is what happened in the process of the study, and kind of the outcomes that they found about refeeding are sort of secondary. All right, so let's go through what this was. Okay, so it was a clinical study at the University of Maryland from November of 1944 to I think it was October of 1945. So it was almost a year long. The purpose of the study was to understand the physical and psychological effects of semi-starvation. They wanted to identify the best way to refeed people. Now, if you're putting things together, the timing of this whole idea was really about how to refeed people who had been starved during World War II. And then this also could then offer insights into eating disorders like anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa. So on campus, the researchers had more than 200 people volunteer. The requirements were that participants had to be male, single, demonstrate good physical and mental health, and they used the MMPI, which is the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. So that was pretty new at the time, but that's what they used. It's still used today. They also had to show an ability to get along well with others under challenging circumstances and have an interest in relief work, because that was essentially the point of the study, right? They ended up with 36 men selected to participate. So in the study, the men had to lose 25% of their normal body weight. So they spent the first 3 months eating a normal diet of 3,200 calories a day. Take note of their normal diet in the mid-1940s was 3,200 calories a day. Then it was 6 months of semi-starvation, which was, hold on to yourself, 1,570 calories a day. That's what they called semi-starvation. Think about what people are told to eat now, and then think about 1,570 calories. Okay, the calorie count, the 1,570 calories were divided between breakfast and lunch. So think about how many people do that today, right? You tracking with me? All right. See why I wanted to talk about this? It all fits together. Okay. So then after the 6 months of this starvation piece, they had to lose the 25% of their body weight. So it was 3 months of normal eating, 6 months of the semi-starvation. Then they had 3 months of restricted rehabilitation. So that was eating 2,000 to 3,200 calories a day, followed by a final 8 to 12 week period of unrestricted rehab where there were no limits on their caloric intake. The nutrition that they were given was designed to mimic what people were fed in Europe during the war. So it was a lot of potatoes, root vegetables, bread, macaroni. Again, think about what people eat today. And what we eat today of those things are also ultra processed. Anyway, they were also required to maintain normal activities. So they were required to work 15 hours a week in the lab, walk 22 miles a week, participate in various educational activities for 25 hours a week. So the whole time, the researchers measured both psychological and physiological changes. So let's start with what happened on the physiological side, right? During the semi-starvation phase, they had a gaunt appearance, significant decreases in strength and stamina, significant decrease in body temperature and heart rate, decreased sex drive, anemia, lower extremity edema. So that's when fluid builds up and we see it looks like pretty significant swelling, low blood pressure, dizziness and fainting spells, frequent urination and constipation, decreased red blood cells and white blood count, hair and nail loss or slow growth, thin, rough skin, ringing in their ears. That was just the physical things. On the psychological front, during the semi-starvation phase, the hunger made them obsessed with food. They dreamt about it, they fantasized about food, they read and talked about food. They hyper-focused on bodily activities, like that urination. They would savor the 2 meals a day that they were given. Mood and energy-wise, they experienced fatigue, irritability, anxiety, depression, apathy, where it's like they're just like indifferent to life, to things. They also had body image concerns, and they reported decreases in mental ability. But the interesting piece there is like the decreased mental ability didn't necessarily show up in tests. It was more a function of what they believed about themselves. And then this is wild. There was one participant who was chopping wood, right? This was part of the normal daily routines that he was supposed to keep going with. So he was chopping wood with an axe and accidentally, or maybe not, chopped off like 3 of his own fingers. And when he was asked if it was on purpose, he said he didn't know. Like he couldn't confirm or deny if he hit his own fingers on purpose with the axe. So this phase, that starvation phase, was so challenging. 3 subjects broke the diet, so their data was excluded from the conclusions. And then a 4th guy was excluded because he didn't meet the weight loss goal of that 25% of his weight. And these effects of semi-starvation are why I want to talk about this study and talk about this now at the beginning of a new year. Because this is the quintessential time when people are on their quote-unquote health kick, right? Or embarking on one, and likely following some version of eat less, move more. Even if you're not entirely doing that, there's almost this reaction to the overeating around the holidays to where in the beginning of the year, people will tend to eat less. And then looking at the calorie counts, right? Now, if you're a frequent or longtime listener, you know I'm not a fan of counting calories, right? It's the quality of those calories that matters. Nevertheless, in this case with this study, it gives us a way to compare the situations, right? So that we have some sort of context, right? A similar metric. So their semi-starvation, right, was about 1,500 calories a day. Today, you will see recommendations to eat like 1,000 or 1,200 calories per day if you're trying to quote unquote lose weight. Or some people are eating that 1,200 calories a day to try to maintain a weight loss. And look at what happened to these participants with like the 1,500-ish calories a day. Adding to all this, by the way, they were all men. Think about female bodies and the complexities of our hormones, right? So you can only imagine how much worse the findings would have been if they had included women. And then this is making my head go. So I feel like I need to add to this. All of the side effects that they saw in the study are exactly what I used to see in my clients who had lap band surgery or other bariatric surgeries. It's also what I see daily now in people taking Ozempic, Wegovy, or other semaglutide or GLP-1 agonist pharmaceuticals. And I think it's interesting as we look at the process of helping people off these medications and managing their nutrition and their weight and their health, like what this study looked at. You know, the other thing that is like popping up in my mind as we're doing this. So in August of 2023, we did 2 episodes about birth control. And it's interesting about what happened in that study with women who were deemed well at the beginning, but were not at the end and weren't able to complete the study. So at the risk of some trigger warnings here, I'll just recommend that everybody go back and listen to those episodes. But I think there are pieces of these that I think give us reason in this moment to say, wait a minute, how we're going about this stuff becomes really important, right? I think the impact of low calorie eating, it's really powerful, right? Look at what happened to these people from like 1,500 calories a day. And it doesn't necessarily translate to health, even if it means the number on the scale is going down. So the men in this experiment lost 25% of their weight and basically the entire quality of life. So I share this with you to implore you this year and always to choose a path toward your health and life goals that truly supports health in every aspect, meaning physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, like all aspects of health. So just to bookend the study, what ended up happening is World War II ended in May of 1945. So if you remember, with all the phases of the plan, they weren't through the research when aid workers were going to need the findings. So what the researchers did was they were concerned that like all this sacrifice would be for nothing. So they published a 70-page booklet called Men and Hunger, a psychological manual for relief workers, so that the relief workers in Europe could then help the people after the war. And it offered some practical advice based on the lessons they learned in the lab. The official experiment ended October of 1945. In the final phases of rehabilitation, both the restricted piece and the unrestricted, there were also some interesting insights that they gained. In the restricted rehab phase, the caloric intake was incrementally increased. And so that approach is actually what we see often today in eating disorder treatment centers. And then in the unrestricted phase of rehab, participants were warned to not just like go wild and overeat everything, but many did. And so essentially on this end, they also just looked at weight gain, not necessarily body composition, right? How much of that was fat versus muscle. But the other piece is that they were coming from such a starving state. They concluded that people in that place just need calories, right? They need food and lots of food. Now, later in 1950, the researchers published their data in a 2-volume set called The Biology of Human Starvation. It is still the landmark text on the subject of human starvation. And frankly, like given sort of the moral and ethical implications of the process of the study, I think we will never see anything similar or try to replicate this ever again. But I think the Minnesota starvation experiment is fascinating because it really reinforces to me the connection between mind and body, the importance of quality nutrition, and that how we go about achieving our health goals is incredibly important. And while this was conducted 80 years ago, it is not lost on me that we are seeing the same findings today with common weight loss approaches and the weight loss medications. So I can't help but see it. I knew we had to talk about this. Nat, I know I just said a lot. Anything going through your mind in this moment?
I did think the experiment was going to be a lot darker. Like I was thinking like Stanford prison experiment, like as soon as you started talking about it. So I thought it was going to be like a lot darker, but it is just super interesting. And when you look at like what people were doing so many years ago to try and figure out how bodies work, like you really didn't know how many calories you needed or what might happen if you were starving, you know, like to watch, you know, the physical and mental ramifications of the food access. It's really interesting how far we've come.
Well, but the other side of that is like, as far as we've come on the research side, it's still the approach that everybody's using now to quote unquote lose weight is exactly or even more extreme of what they did to these people in the study that created all of these side effects.
Yeah, actually much darker what people do to themselves voluntarily.
Right.
You know, yeah.
Kind of wild. Well, as always, everybody, I'm your host, Jen Trepic. Connect with me on Instagram or all social media. I'm at Jen Trepic, JENNTREPECK. Website is asaladwithasideofries.com. Pick your platform, send a message. I want to hear from you. It's also not too late to join us for the Healthy Vibe Tribe in 2025. I love it hearing from you. Please send a message, ask your questions. Natalie, thank you again for doing this with me.
Thank you. This was fun.
Oh, good.
All right.
Oh, good. And of course, everybody, if you are not already, join our membership program by going to glow.fm/saladwithaside-of-fries. This shows your support for this podcast, this community, and most importantly, it supports your health. You'll get this week's recipe for cacio e pepe frittata, plus 15% off supplements with a questionnaire to help you with your personalized regimen. Well, friends, that's it for today's episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. Congratulations for making yourself and your health a priority. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to click subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform. Share us with a friend, and we'll be back next week. Always remember, you deserve it, and you are worth it. Happy healthy.